depending depending how long you've been on this channel, you may have heard me go over a review years ago and very often bring up this book, The Great Brexit Swindle. Now, why is this important? Because despite the claims of the Leavers, people like Nigel Farage and so on and so on, that the elites were the ones trying to really keep us in the European Union. And yes, they were making very clear economic arguments for why we must remain in the EU. What people like Farage don't tell you is he's part of the establishment himself. You only have to look at Nigel Farage's career as an investment banker and his entire career as the guy behind UKIP, and how much UKIP was backed by huge billionaires companies. Even the Leave campaign, backed by Aaron Banks and other various billionaires companies who essentially wanted to leave the EU so that they could, well, have a bit more of a tax haven essentially in the UK. This was what it was all about. And let's not be under any estimation, leaving the EU was always a very fringe view. You know, it never really entered mainstream politics until David Cameron essentially decided that he was going to try and get his party under control. Even now, I guarantee if you held a referendum, if we could somehow, in the final hours, you know, it's a shame that the coronavirus is going on, because if it was, I would be going for hella high water that everyone should be out down in Westminster this weekend protesting about this and saying, what on earth are you doing? Stop it. This is not what you promised at the referendum. This is not what you promised at the 2019 campaign. It's time to stop and rethink this. But of course, I'm not going to. I wish I could, and I do think under normal circumstances that would be what was going on, but unfortunately we can't. So before we get into today's article, just on this topic, please do hit that like and share button, and of course down below there are links to my Patreon page as well as a one-off donation link, and thank you very much to the people who do support me that way. So on with the article. This comes from The Guardian, and the title is Brexit was never a grassroots movement, but an elitist political takeover. Lodged in my mind is an image that grows in significance with each of this week's Brexit headlines. Through leaks, briefings, and Boris Johnson's merciful dash to dinner in Brussels, the memory nags at me. Unpack it, and you will find some of the seeds of this chaotic moment. In the spring of 2016, I am in Newport, South Wales. A couple of months before the Brexit vote, Westminster has all but called it for Remain. Yet, what strikes me out here is the volume and the vehemence of support for Leave. The stages, it seems, have got this one badly wrong, and all the conversations I hold are against the backdrop of urban decline. The vape shop used to be a jeweller's. The only jobs advertised in temp agency windows are minimum wage. So far, so familiar. The same news media that for decades before the referendum barely acknowledged these people and places have spent the 4 years since vox popping them into journalistic puree for pinpoints and discontent. But pan the camera across Newport's commercial street to the hotel ballroom that is now a pound shop, and out of sight from that, and all I have is a sign that I've never seen depicted on print or on a screen. Huddled around a table are 4 teenage boys, proffering pamphlets, badges, slogans, and another time in another place I might mistake their wares for the Watchtower or newspapers from some political sect. But no, this is their lot. In their wax jackets are a group of troops for the official campaign to exit the EU. Shock and awe this isn't. Most have yet to finish their A-levels, while one should be revising for his GCSEs and not yet there. Are almost no takers for their literature. In charge is Callum Vega, who's been volunteering for Vote Leave for months now, and now in the ranks all 19 among its senior staff in Wales. This is the busiest time of his life. Working 16-hour days and shepping across the country, he's developed a keen eye for who will be most receptive to the Brexit message. I look out for men, especially from ethnic minorities, and most of all if they appear less well off, he says, with no condescension. And I met plenty of locals furious at Brussels for reasons that are largely homegrown. Hospital waiting lists, the death of decent jobs, racist tales about foreigners getting free cash. When I rang Vega last week to compare notes on canvassing that spring, he said, there were a lot of people who voted Brexit who don't care about the EU. They wanted to stick a finger up to the establishment, or, failing that, David Cameron. And cut, because that scene is much what lies at the heart of this week's crisis. There are plenty that undermine the retrofitting myths around the Brexiteers. First, consider the setting. A place raring for a protest vote, and with plenty to protest about. Now inspect the protagonist. A campaign that commands only schoolboy foot soldiers and superficial public support, but is eager to channel palpable anger for its own ends, however ill-defined or unrealistic the easiest deal in human history actually is. And grievance meets megaphone, stuffed palm grease smooths the Etonian cheek. For all Vote Leave's claims to represent the non-metropolitan masses, Vega cannot remember much contact that either he or his managers had with the London headquarters. The campaign's Westminster lobby boss, Matthew Elliott, had hardly figured in Wales, while Dominic Cummings was happy to be ensconced among the rich remainers of North London by buying up ads on Facebook. In June of 2016 marked the point in which every millionaire right-wing crackpot and Oxford-educated libertarian began aggregating the moral authority for the people of their own heart-stuckish schemes and quack policies. To do that, they have leaned on the voices of Brexit or even Johnson, cast by working people in places such as South Wales or North East Derbyshire. The support for the cruise booking retirees in Hamptonshire plainly does not cast the same spell. But from the EU to lockdown, the hard right self-presentation as the true rebel spirit of Albion gets them taken seriously. It's how The Economist winds up calling Jacob Rees-Mogg and his colleagues the closest thing to Britain has produced to sans clotters. And when the real estate mogul Richard Trice turns up on TV decrying the dangerous anti-British behaviour of taking a knee, the only thing that stops him getting laughed off the set are his credentials as a leading Brexiteer. Yet, Brexit is a fake social movement. The demand for a referendum was granted by Cameron to his own Eurosceptic backbenchers. The campaign has always relied on the sponsorship of millionaires, from James Goldsmith to Aaron Banks. Its focus was never on levelling up and other such lip service, but on the technicalities of trade and the European Court of Justice. And whenever in the past year Nigel Farage has tried to muster a decent crowd from Meredith to Sunderland, he has flopped. And this is not just grassroots, this is pure astroturf. Where the Brexit campaign has succeeded is not from below, but at the very top. It ensured an elite takeover of the Tory party, and it has poleaxed progressives who, scarred by both the referendum and the 2019 wipeout, don't know how to respond. Many have defended the EU and so played right into the hands of the right, who were only ever using it as a proxy for a more millionaire discount closer to home. Keir Starmer and his colleagues now debate the merits of voting through an EU deal, no matter how rubbish, yet to do so for fear of annoying the voters in the north of England would only rob them of the right to criticise the fallout. It would do Labour serious damage in the Holyrood elections next May. Farage and Rees-Mogg boasted of Brexit as a moment of great democratic renewal. Never mind the job losses. Taste the sovereignty. A new paper researched by Cardiff and Cambridge universities compares survey voters in former coalfields for people of other deprived areas. People in mining communities feel disenfranchised, ignored, and sceptical about political processes to a greater extent than anywhere else. It finds and where 2016 gave such people a renewed interest in politics, that has now tailed off. How could it not? Brexit is now about meaningful votes and leadership contests and focus group slogans. Meanwhile, the people it relies on for its legitimacy remain peripheral to the actual British economy and marginal to its politics. Unlike other right-wing populisms, voters for the Leave supported not a person nor a party, but a process. One that will take decades to work out, and one that will inevitably be decided by political, technocratic, and business elites. Even if Brexit gains its kryptonite power from being deployed in the name of the people of Newport and Aslington and Bolsover, it will leave them out, just as it will the schoolboys who canvassed for them. And speaking last weekend, Vega tells me he'd been far too bothered about COVID and Christmas shopping to think about the latest dramas with the EU. He went to Trafalgar Square for the big Brexit booze-up in January, but hasn't much followed it since. I'm assuming it's just going all in the right direction, isn't it? He said. Yeah, and that's something we are going to have to worry about incredibly even more, because again, the fact that if you think that, you know, Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg and all these other very leading Tory Brexiteers care about the people who actually voted for Brexit, you've got another thing coming. There is no way they are going to, like I say, level up. It's complete lip service. And again, we saw that during the spending review. There was just not enough money put forward for communities who need it the most, and especially now. And what's, again, the ironic thing, the only organisation that really helped these people, and in some cases kept councils afloat, which is something we're going to have to see even more of, councils going bankrupt, they actually relied on EU funding to help them keep them afloat. And we are going to see more and more councils go bankrupt next year. You know, it's not surprising that the first council ever to go bankrupt was a Conservative one, because we are going to get more and more austerity, and things are going to get worse, and people who voted for Brexit, who were told it's going to make your lives better in some nebulous way, are going to realise very quickly, well, it's not. And at the end of the day, they can't blame the EU anymore, despite how much they're trying to blame the EU for the current failings of negotiating teams. Remember, this is something the UK has decided to do to itself. You know, Boris Johnson, when he went to dash to Europe for his dinner, could have asked Ursula von der Leyen to say, let's extend the transition period by another year. Let's, you know, have more time to talk about these things. It could have very well easily done that. You know, and he would have had potential political clout to say, look, we're not going to do it because of COVID. But there's a lot of hardcore Brexiteers that want to do that because they know that COVID will help cover up a lot of the economic damage that Brexit does. And then they could turn around and say, well, it wasn't Brexit, it was COVID that did it. So, as always, thanks for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button. And of course, down below, there are a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link as well. And thank you very much to the people that do support me that way. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.